Well, you know what they say, 60 is the new 30. So the alliance is young in many ways, with opportunities, challenges, but opportunities to shape the strategic environment here, but globally, if we're deliberate about it. In my experience, and I was in the Bush White House for almost 5 years, in part because of John Howard's close friendship with George Bush, in part because our administration put a high emphasis on shared values with allies, but in part because of the history and the bipartisan support for the alliance in both countries. Australia had an influence on American policy that was unmatched in terms of other middle powers, if you will, other countries of comparable size, because of our history, because of our extremely tight intelligence relationship and our almost sort of intertwined and interactive policymaking process, especially on the defense side, and because we were together in Afghanistan and Iraq, which, as you know, as we both know, led to intense trust and management of some tough problems. And I think that carries over to the Obama administration. From my experience, things where Australia had a particular influence, the decision on Iraq to go to the UN. Had it been just Tony Blair, I don't think it would have been quite as influential. Early advice on how to deal with regional architecture, APEC and so forth, which was very important in getting, frankly, President Bush to attend every APEC, which President Clinton did not. In some of the warfighting strategies in Afghanistan and Iraq. And looking ahead, I think those are the issues where the US will be inclined to look to and listen to Australian advice. I know there's a lot of skepticism here in Sydney and Canberra, in Australia generally, that the superpower actually listens. There's a little bit of the, I don't know what you call it, Gallipoli complex or something that we look, as Richard Haas said it indelicately in a paper at Australia as our deputy in Asia. I don't think that's accurate. It's hard to describe the leverage Australia has because so much of it is on sensitive issues behind closed doors. I mean, the issues I described are not things that are out in the public domain very much. My sense is the Obama administration, carried the same value and importance of the alliance, experimented quite a bit with G20, with new partnerships like Indonesia. My critique would be that they lost some sight of the values piece and how important it is to have that trust and that common set of worldviews. And I think they're returning to that as they, work with Indonesia and other countries in the G20 and realize that these countries, as important as they're becoming, do not come into this with the game, with the, as we say in baseball, with the pitch that Australia's had, that we can count on. Moving forward, I think the big issues are going to be, where we're going to need and look to Australia for, as pilots say, a vector check as we deal with Asia, are going to be architecture. As we do the Trans-Pacific Partnership, Chorus, I am told, I worked for the old regime, but I'm told by the current White House staffers who had my job and friends that Kevin Rudd's intervention, if you will, about Barack Obama during his first Asia trip about how critical American free trade policies were to American leadership was really quite decisive. He heard it from Lee Myung-bak and Lee Hsien Loong in Singapore and others. So thinking through and being deliberate about a trans-Pacific trade architecture, very critical. TPP, how we manage Japan's entry and so forth, we're going to have to work together. Huge issue will be our global posture review in the coming years. It will be complicated by our budget debates because there won't be clarity until probably 2013. And we'll be debating new doctrines like air-sea battle or how we sustain a presence which will have to be probably a little more dispersed because of the anti-access area denial and missile threats we face for political reasons. So this whole global posture review is going to have to be worked very closely with Australia. And I think we'll be in a new situation where we're going to have to think through what some Japanese strategic thinkers are calling host regional support. In other words, there's going to, in my view, there's going to have to be some quiet dialogue, Japan, Australia, Japan, Korea, Australia, thinking through among federated, not a NATO, but sort of federated allies who are going to sustain some American presence and interaction in the years ahead. And there's going to have to be very clear political advice going both ways about what's realistic in terms of American presence in Southeast Asia, here in Australia. But overall, my sense is across the region, among traditional allies, new friends and partners, there is a receptivity to considering more American political and security and military engagement because of China's rise. And we'll have to handle that quite delicately. We learned with Korea in 2004 when we were negotiating what we called strategic flexibility, meaning the right to use our forces for regional contingencies, that if you ask a question and the answer is no, you can actually set yourself back in terms of dissuading China and convincing China of the durability of American presence. So we're going to have to look to Canberra for advice and Lowy on how far is enough, what's the right sweet spot as we have a credible, sustained, and enduring presence that's perhaps more dispersed, that's dissuading China but not over-stimulating China. We're going to have a very deliberate and confidential dialogue, although think tanks like Lowy and CSIS can be and should be part of this, about what's a realistic sweet spot in terms of how we reconfigure American presence. It has to be dissuasive to China, it has to be reassuring to allies, but it can't be too provocative to China. It has to be sustainable. And as I said, we don't want no to be the answer. We don't want China to think that somehow we've overreached the way, frankly, China overreached this last year. So we'll be looking to our alliance with Australia and the trust and confidence and strategic worldview we share. I'm confident that this will be true for the Pentagon and the administration and think tanks as we work through this global posture review in the coming year.